Hi friends! This is an exciting day. We are going to be making our ugly monster kit today. So let's get started. I'm going to leave these friends here just so you have something to look at while we talk about what other things you can bring to the table. Today you are going to need your craft glue. So if you have your tacky glue, put that on the table. It's always good to have a scissors handy. We could do this whole thing, maybe we won't need a scissors, but you know what? Today is a day where we are going to want the scissors to cut out some shapes, maybe trim some things. And so now I'm going to move my monsters down here, and I am going to get a kit, and let's open that up together. So notice that if you're familiar with this monster, this is the monster that you saw in a lot of the pictures that we used for Fall Keiki Camp. Now the monster you're going to be making today is a smaller friend, and everyone got a different color glove because that is the base of our ugly monster. So you have your instructional sheet, keep that on the side. You of course will have a glove. This one is green, I like that. There's a lot of little things in here, so let's be very careful. The first thing I want you to look for, just so we can be safe, is look for your needle. We are going to be doing a little bit of sewing today. Now the needle in your kit might be in there in a different way. It might be stuck into a piece of felt. It might be taped to a card, but either way, as soon as you get your glove out, you want to look for your needle because it is something that, even though it's not super pokey, it is still a sharp tool, and we want to be very careful with it. So I'm going to leave it right where it is in my kit. I have it poked into my felt. So there's my needle. There is my piece of felt I'm going to be using for making my monster's face. This is batting or stuffing. And we, of course, are going to use that to stuff our monster. I have a lot of buttons in here that I might use for eyes. You may have this many, you may not have as many, but you have choices to make for the eyes that you are going to put on your monster. So I'm going to put those on the side. There's even another button in there too. And all of these other good stuff you want to take out too. So you are going to have, we call this Rickrack. It's really a piece of decoration that you can use when you're sewing. We are going to use that to make our monster's face. You are going to have some thread, some embroidery thread. It's going to look different than mine because I opened mine already since I was practicing, but you're going to get a whole hank of thread just for you, and it's going to be in a lot of different colors, just like your glove. And you are going to have a piece of ribbon. We call this satin ribbon because that's the kind of finish that's on it. See how shiny that is? So we're going to put that on the side. I'm going to keep my bag because it's going to be a nice place to put anything extra I have. And I am going to start with, I'm going to put all of this on the side because I am going to work with all of it. I'm going to start with my glove. Because the first thing I'm going to do, because you can notice, right, a glove has 5 fingers on it because it fits over a hand. You know that they call these magic gloves because they fit on big hands and little hands? I like to do that just because I like to put gloves on. But the first thing I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to keep my hand in here because here's what I want to do. I'm going to take the thumb on my glove and I'm going to tuck it inside my glove. And that's a little easier to do if I have my hand in the glove. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the thumb, and you can tell, right? The fingers are longer, the thumb is over here. If you have it flat, it looks like your hand. So you find the thumb. And I'm actually going to take it, I'm going to poke it into the glove. So it's like I'm turning it inside out and I'm kind of hiding it. It's going to be like the secret leg of my monster. So do you see how I kind of tuck that in? So now there's only 4 fingers, which are going to turn into the 4 legs of my monster. Now if you look in your glove, you will see that thumb in there. So if you want to just tuck it away, you kind of give it a tug. Don't pull it too hard because we don't want to make this edge start to go in too far, but when you've tucked it in, now you have the legs for your monster. Okay, I'm going to put my monster to the side. Now, if you're looking at your instruction sheet, the next instruction at number 2 does say, sew eyes onto the glove. And if you look at our monster that we made as our example, their eyes are sewn on. And if you want to practice sewing, do it. Go ahead and take your glove, and as we talk about sewing, you can sew your eyes on here. But let me show you what I'm going to do today. We have a lot of different materials that we can use. I do want you to learn how to sew because it is a really great craft and skill to have. So what I'm going to show you is how to sew with your needle. We are going to sew one of the eyes of our monster to this piece of felt. So we are going to get some sewing in. I just want you to practice at least one eyeball. I do want you to sew it to the felt. And then if you want to sew that to your monster and sew on the other eye, you can do that too. But today I'm going to show you how we're going to sew that button to this piece of felt. I'm going to put my needle very carefully on the side. And the first thing I'm going to do, right, is I have to pick my eyeballs. So I like that. I'm hoping, you know, if you have solid color buttons, you know, pick what you like. We think it's really fun to do a big and a small. If you have some with patterns, to do a stripe and a solid. So I'm going to look at what I have. Ooh, and I have teeny tiny buttons here too. Actually, I do like the way that one looks. I'm going to keep it like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide which of these eyeballs I am going to put on this felt, and I think I like the peach colored eyeball. So you can see the shape I've made around this button is round. Now, if you want to just cut a shape, if you want to just cut a curved shape like a circle, go for it. I decided that I wanted a circle that really I knew would be bigger than my eye, so I just traced the bottom of my glue. So you can see here what I did. I took my pencil and I put my bottle of glue down, and then I just traced all around it on my felt so that I ended up with a circle. Now I'm going to get my scissor and I'm going to cut that shape out, because this is going to be that fun way of me making my ugly monster special by having a special eye that has a circle around it. So I'm going to save that felt. Maybe I'll use it for something else. So here's that circle. Here is where I'm going to put my eye. Now, I know where that's going to go. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you an easy way to get your thread through your needle. If you have a grown-up that wants to help you, great. But since you are going to learn how to sew, it is nice to know how to thread a needle. And all that means is taking your thread and putting one end of it through the hole in your needle. And it is actually called an eye. So that is the eye of your needle. So I'm just using this for my example. So this is just a piece of thread. If you look at embroidery thread, there's a lot of little threads in the thread. So if you are wondering, I actually have 3 little threads in this big thread right now. But it doesn't matter how many. If you want to grab all of them, go ahead, because your thread will have 6 in it. 6 little threads. So if you look right here, I have the end of my thread and I cut it nice and clean across. I'm going to take my pinching fingers and I'm actually going to hold my thread so close to the tip it almost disappears between my fingers. Then I'm going to take my needle with the eye, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the eye of my needle right onto that thread. My hope is that holding it nice and tight here in my fingers, it's actually just going to go right through the eye, just like that. And again, that might take some practice. Maybe not everything goes through. I'll show you a trick. If you are having a hard time going through and it's a little frustrating, take your scissors and just cut a new end of your thread. So I'm just going to take my thread and I'm going to cut it. And what that does is it makes a nice clean end of your thread. I'm going to hold it real close to my pinching fingers again, to my fingertips. I'm going to take my needle again and I'm going to try to make it go through. And this time, it's a little easier. So I'm going to get it through the eye of my needle. Oops. Try it again. Nice and tight. I'm pinching it. I'm going to put my needle right on top of it and get it to go through the eye. Just like that. So now I have my thread through the eye of my needle. You can go ahead and practice that on your own if you want to stop the video and practice, but I just wanted to show you how to do that. I have another needle that I threaded, and this is the one I'm going to use to sew today. So remember, a needle, whether it has a little bit of a rounded tip or it is a real sewing needle, it does have a point, so you have to be very, very careful. I took my thread and I made it long, and you can see I put my needle right about halfway along my thread. That means this side is as long as the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a knot on one end. Don't worry about putting it all the way at the very end. All I want you to do is run it through once. If you want to put it back and put it through again, that'll just make a bigger knot. The knot is going to keep your thread from going all the way through your felt. So if you can see, that's a pretty big knot. And there's my needle. And you'll see, I'm now going to hold my button on top of my felt circle. Here are the holes that I'm aiming for. These are the ones that I want to sew through. And here's an easy way to do that. Instead of holding this, because some people will hold this and then sort of keep poking it to try to find the hole, that's a sure way to maybe poke your finger, and you don't want to do that. Take your needle and you're just going to poke it up into the middle of your felt. See that? And now I can just put my button on top of that. Ta-da! So now I'm going to hold my button in my felt. I'm going to pull my needle all the way up. Now you can see with these buttons only had 2 holes in them. So my needle went up and then my needle went back down. My needle went up, my needle went back down. This button has 4 holes. So here's my choice. I can choose to make an X for my eyes, or I can make 2 lines. And I think I'm gonna make an X. That means I'm gonna go up in this hole and I'm gonna go diagonally to this other hole across. And you'll see what I mean. So I went down through that buttonhole, down through my felt, and I'm going to pull it nice and tight. Ta-da! Now here is the tricky part. Now that I know where my button is, I do have to be careful. I am going to poke it up through my felt, and I am going to try to find that hole. But just know, right, everywhere your thread is here, it can't be far from the other hole in your button. So I am going to keep sort of poking. And if you can see, I found the hole in the button. So now I'm going to pull it up. And you guessed it, I'm going to go back down to the very last hole in my button. And I'm going to grab my needle on the other side, being very careful. And voila! There is my eye sewn on with a little X in the middle. Now I'm going to turn it over and look at the back side where my felt is, because what I'm going to do is I just need to tie this on, right? I need to tie a knot. So here's my thread and my needle, and I can see this, what's called a stitch under here, and I'm just going to wrap my needle under it, because all I really want to do is almost tangle up all of this thread so I can tie it in another knot and my button will stay on. So I'm finding that stitch and I'm just trying to poke underneath it with my needle like that. See how you can see the thread? I got it underneath there. I'm going to pull it through, and oh, before I close this hole, I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to put it through This is my way of tying a knot. And in fact, if I want to go back down and up through that loop again, I can, and I'm going to pull it nice and tight. Ta-da! And there's my eye on my felt. Now remember, this is going to be on the back side of my eye, so no one's going to see all this thread. I'm not going to cut right next to my knot, but I'm going to cut this thread off pretty short, as long as it's underneath my eye. Ta-da! So for sewing, I do want you to practice at least putting one eyeball on that felt circle for your eye. If you feel like it, go ahead and challenge yourself and sew your other button right onto the glove. All you would do is gently put your hand inside your glove, right? Place your button on there and see where you want to put it. And just like we did with the felt, you're going to carefully take your needle, poke it up through your glove, and put your button on where you want that eye to be, if you're going to sew it onto your glove. But thank you for challenging yourself and working to learn how to sew. Now I'm going to show you why we have the glue. But at first, before we glue our face on, we want to make sure we have all of our pieces. I have one eye that I sewed. I chose my stripy eye. Am I going to do that one? No, I want to do a small stripy eye. Is my second piece of my face, and here is the color Rickrack that came with my glove that I'm going to put for the mouth. Now you can, remember how we did some practicing before? I want to practice to see where this mouth is going to fit, and oh my goodness, my monster is going to be talkative, but it does not need a mouth that big. So I need to use my scissors to cut my mouth a little smaller. And look what happens though. I trim that mouth. I have a whole other piece of Rickrack that I could use for something else. That could be a decoration for something. I could even go find another glove and make another monster. So here's my mouth. I got to make sure I have my eyes, I have my mouth, and I'm going to keep at hand my ribbon, because this is what I'm going to use to close up my monster's head. So I'm going to put all of that on the side, because the first thing I'm going to do is stuff my monster. So I'm going to find that batting, the stuffing, and like you can see in this monster, I want to make sure the legs have a little bit of structure in it, like that. I don't want to just shove this all into the glove, because then it's going to be hard to get that stuffing down in the fingers. So I'm not going to break it in half, but you know, I might pull off just a little bit, like a third of that ball of stuffing. And then I'm going to make 4 little balls of stuffing, because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 legs. So I'm going to split that into 2. I'm going to make each of these into 2, like that. Now the nice thing about stuffing is if you kind of mush it together and roll it together, it starts to get a little tighter. The fibers tangle into themselves, and so it makes it easier for you to hold it and make it fit. So now all you're going to do is push down into your glove and find those legs, and you're going to push a piece of that batting down into each leg. And you can fit your hand in there. You can move it around. See? So I don't want to shove it all down here. I want to make sure it's all through the legs. So I'm going to kind of move it around. I'm going to get my next one. So you go ahead and stuff each leg. And I'll do mine too. There, now that's the 4th leg of my monster. Each one has a little stuffing in it. Now be careful, because I kept putting my hand in and out of the glove. That thumb kind of wanted to come out and visit instead of be a secret leg. So I'm going to just make sure that I have it tucked all the way in. So I'm going to push it back in like that and make sure it's all the way in. So there's my little stuffed legs, and now I'm going to use the rest of my stuffing to make the body. Now you can see from our friend here, I'm going to fill what is the palm or the biggest part of the hand in the glove with the stuffing. Because I want to leave the wrist part or the stretchy part at the top. I don't want any stuffing up there. I want to make sure all my stuffing is in the hand. So I'm going to poke it down. Ooh, and there's the shape of my body. Now, I'm going to get my ribbon and I'm going to tie up my wrist to make the very tippy top of my monster's head. So I'm going to take my ribbon, lay my glove on top of it, and there's nothing if you don't want to make it perfectly in the middle, you don't have to, because remember, your monster is going to be very, very special and unique. So I'm going to wrap my ribbon around here, and so you can start to pull it real tight, and you'll see your ribbon is long, so you can wind it around again. Bring this to this side. I can bring this one to this side. And I'm going to pull this tight. You know, part of it is I don't want my stuffing to come out. But look, if I push my ribbon down, I can make my monster a little bit chubbier. And when I do that, it makes for a really fun tippy top of my monster's head. So remember, I wrapped around twice, and look, I have so much ribbon, I could go around again if I wanted to. But I just went around twice, and now I'm going to tie my bow. If this part's a little tricky for you, where did my wrap go? Then get somebody to help you. But pull it as tight as you can, and then make that cross, right? Pull it through, and you're going to make a bow. Now pull it nice and tight. Make my 2 loops. And there's the top of my monster's head. I like kind of leaving the loops uneven. I'm going to maybe trim that later. But now that I have the top of my monster's head, I'm ready to put on the face. And again, right, just for practicing, for placement. Ooh, that's a giant eye. In fact, I'm going to put it on this side so it looks like my bigger friend monster. And I know my other eye is going to be right there, and that the mouth is going to go underneath that. So now that I know where it's going to go, I can use my craft glue to glue it on. Now today I happen to have a glue gun here with me. I'm just going to use a glue gun. You can of course use your glue. I'm going to use a glue gun just so that I can hold up my monster for you and the eyes won't fall off, because tacky glue is a little bit wet, right? And it may not dry fast enough for me to hold up my monster for you. And if you do have a glue gun at home, either because you already have one or maybe you got one for one of our Keiki camps, feel free to plug that in safely. So I got my eyeballs on. And now we did figure out that for the mouth, the tacky glue really is best because it is a heavy piece of embellishment or decoration. So because Rickrack is sort of wavy, I'm going to put it on my Rickrack, on my embellishment, so that I know that it's touching every single part. And then I'm going to put it across the bottom of my monster. And there's my mouth. And I know that glue is going to dry clear, so I won't even see it later. And la-la! My monsters have friends now. That's our big monster, and here's the monster that you made today. Thank you so much, friends. Please take a picture of your monster, maybe make a puppet show, and then show them to us. Send them to us, please, because we would love to see them. Thank you for your hard work, and we will see you next time.